All right, hello everyone.
Hello,
This
hello.
this is Natalie Goni and Corinne here. We tried to do this on Instagram Live. It didn't work, so we're moving it to Zoom, which we are both much more familiar with.
Yeah, I felt like we were back in the 90s, like trying to log on and kept
Figuring it out. Oh. Anyway, all right.
tried.
So Natalie and we want to speak to you a little bit about nonlinear movement today, which
Mm,
is an embodiment practice that we both love and teach and bring into our classes, but also coaching work, right? And
mm.
workshops
Yeah, in some shape or form.
in
Mm.
some shape or form. Exactly. And yeah, we thought maybe this is a series of conversations we're going to have. Let's see. But today we thought we just want to share with you how we came to this practice, why we love it, how it benefits us, maybe some challenges also that we came about with it, or what we see others, find challenging at times. Um, yeah, and we will maybe also speak a little bit about the name nonlinear movement, which is not very sexy, but actually exactly what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Natalie, do you wanna share a little bit how you came to it, or shall I go first? How do we want to do this?
Um, I can go first. When we were thinking about doing this, I can't actually remember. All I remember, it must have been 2021, I think. So about 3 years ago, mid around, yeah, no, mid pandemic. And actually in previous to that, I was really quite deep in exploring embodiment and I was actually doing a 2-year program called Tantric Embodiment, which was really a really deep exploration about self and living life in an embodied way, really. So I think that I found Michaela Boehm's work, the founder of Nonlinear Movement, through that journey. And I perhaps attended one of her classes online during the pandemic and really loved it. And uh, yeah, and I think it was something that was actually quite liberating. Like I've um, done yoga teacher training in the past and got quite heavily into yoga and this movement, this practice, nonlinear, was quite different to yoga. So there are some elements, I think, from yoga, but there was something more liberating about it for me, which
Mm.
really kind of caught my attention.
Mm.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. Well, when I thought about this, for me, I think actually it's interesting that you mentioned yoga now, because I feel like yin yoga, even though it is much more static, right? You're not moving much, but
Mm,
yin yoga for me is a type of yoga where I feel like I really, that journey of embodiment really began for me, like to really sense on a deeper level what's happening inside the body while you're in these long held poses.
mm,
And after I got into yin yoga, I learned about women's temple, and in the women's temple where I came to in 2014, we had this practice. We called it intuitive movement. So in the temple we just moved a lot in whatever way the body wanted to move, and I found that from the first time incredibly liberating. To just no one telling me how to move, but me just moving freely. And I've been doing women's tempo by the time I came to nonlinear movement, like already for like 8 years or so. And it's actually through you that, you know, you did the training, and as part of the training, right, we have to do it every day while we are in the container of the training. And you shared very generously your experience, your intimate experience with nonlinear movement on Instagram. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, this seems very similar to already what I've been exposed to and have been doing, but also slightly different. So that's how I then was like, yeah, through you, I came to Michaela. And there was also something happening during the time. We are both, right, our connection goes back to Hong Kong. And we were living through these quarantine times during COVID 2021. And I was stuck in a hotel room with my husband for 3 weeks without being able to open the window.
Yeah.
And I knew already from years of practice, if I want to get out of this experience not traumatized, I gotta be moving my body. So I did sort of intuitive movement every day, and it really helped soothe my nervous system. It helped my I call it like the animal in me to feel like I can still move even though I'm stuck physically really in this room for 3 weeks, right? And so that's when I realized even more through experience, geez, like moving our body intuitively, giving my body the chance to just express whatever is going on and release. I really think that changed my experience of quarantine. Yeah, and so then through that I came to nonlinear movement, like the teacher training in 2022, which I think was a year after you or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just reflecting actually on our pathways, and I met you. Well, I met you at the Garden Gathering Festival where you were holding a women's temple. I'd never done a women's temple before or participated in a women's temple. And that was actually probably one of my first experiences of exploring myself in a much more free way and feminine way, because I think yoga can be quite masculine in its structure and its discipline. But you're right, for me it also was the first pathway into becoming more sensitized to my body. But yeah, and then meeting you through women's temple, doing women's temple training, and then I'm just curious about our intertwining pathways. But you're right, nonlinear movement for me during the pandemic was kind of I wouldn't say a lifesaver, but it was a real opportunity to go inwards. You know, we couldn't go outwards in Hong Kong. You actually, had you moved by then?
No, I moved after I had to do 2 times hotel quarantine. Yeah, I moved March 2022 or April or May 2022. Yeah. Yeah, to Singapore.
And yeah, I remember you were doing there was a lot of travel that you were doing, but in a restricted way. But in Hong Kong, I literally couldn't go anywhere for nearly 3 years. And so the practice that I did that you just referred to was recording 30 days, like a diary of nonlinear movement. And we have to do that for our practitioner training, but I decided to do it for 100 days and then post my reflections on Instagram. And that's what you're referring to, is what you tapped into and
yeah.
Kind of...
And it was really, well, I mean, I think we both agree it is a very intimate practice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's just you, me with me, you with you, experience your inner world. We call them sensations and feelings, uh, noticing thought loops, emotional closure, or stuckness,
Mm.
and then just give ourselves to all that is happening in our life at any given moment, and move it. And yeah, when you did that story, I remember on Instagram,
Mm.
that I just thought it was so inspiring to see that. Yeah,
Mm. I loved it. I felt there was a vulnerability actually, I
yeah.
remember. And I work so for both of us, this practice is an element of a bigger picture of our work, right? And a lot of my main work is working with leaders in organizations and corporate organizations. So there's a part of me that when I was posting these quite intimate reflections about this 100-day practice, it was quite vulnerable. I was conscious of that, but it did something for me. It really ingrained the practice into my being,
Mm.
um, and it's nonlinear movement now is something that I will always do. And it's like once you start it as a practice, I think it just becomes ingrained in a way of being. And I don't often now have really structured sort of, I don't go, right, I'm going to put this playlist on and I'm going to have an hour of nonlinear movement. It's more like 5 minutes before I go to sleep, or kind of post a long Zoom call or something like that, that helps me just process and move things through my system, my nervous system, my mind.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, it's I definitely recommend. I mean, I followed the practice, the 100-day. It's actually was created by, I can't remember her name. Is it Ellie somebody? It's an artist, and she started this movement, which was like 100-day something, but it was doing art for every day for 100 days. So
Mm.
it was actually following that framework.
Beautiful.
And it's to kind of ingrain something into your
Yeah.
daily
Well, what do you love? Like, what do you love about nonlinear movement? Maybe these days, as you say, like you use it less in a former, in a like, I'm going to go down and I'm going to do this for an hour. Like you weave it into your days. Yeah.
life.
Um, but what is it about the practice that, well, in what way does it benefit you, and what draws you back to it? Maybe that's the
Mhm.
right question. Why do you come back to it? Because, right, we all, many of us, we have lots of different practices. Why do you come back to nonlinear movement?
I think because it is so liberating. I think that's really it. Like it's so um you can do it anywhere. You can do it, you don't have to have a yoga mat. You can you can be in your bed, you can be sitting on the sofa, you can be on an airplane, can be anywhere. And there's just something like you mentioned earlier about your kind of wild self, when you were in quarantine, that ability to connect with um your wild feminine self that was kind of contained and restricted in that moment. And it's remembering that. It's remembering like my body can and should be moving in ways that are weird and expressive and like freeing, because so much of our life is um, we're kind of having to fit ourselves into a certain space, whether it's like on a Zoom call or, on a public transport or whatever it might be. We're always so boxed in, I think.
Mhm.
And it's like this ability to just um, let loose,
Mm.
What about
Mhm.
you?
Yeah, yeah, similar, I think, to what you shared. And I think that feeling of, well, that's boxed in, right? Or like that's also in a way like living more up here, more in the
Yeah.
head. Of course, most of us, our days are spent organizing, planning, we are thinking, we are in that more sort of linear, you know, linear path, because that's really what our society is often built on.
Mm,
We can call it the masculine if we want to, the do, the go. But at the same time, I think what I appreciate so much with nonlinear movement is really how it brings me into like really, it drops my attention from the upper part of my body by just closing the eyes, being on the mat, on the ground, uh, or just really closing the eyes and moving. It gets me really out of my head,
mm,
away from um, analyzing,
mm.
strategizing, thinking things through, and really give myself more to the wisdom that comes when we stop doing that. Whether
Yeah.
that is, and it's like white space, many of us have heard, you go for a walk with no distraction, no phone, no music, and you just walk. That's usually when I have the best ideas, in that
Mm,
sort of white space. And the same thing is like with nonlinear movement. It just gets me into, yeah, the more subtle experience of myself and of life. And it's that unclinking or unclenching. It's almost like it's just a different way of being and breathing. And
mm,
I do really I need that. Like this is like this is half of the other spectrum of what I feel we ought to be living, right? In
mm,
a more nonlinear uh, way, because a lot of creativity and, yeah, release happens there, and wisdom that can come to us, which which we can't access through thinking through.
mm,
So yeah, and I love it in both ways. I really love setting the stage almost in the evenings with candlelight. I with the music I chose and really give myself to it. And then, as you say, I love that I can just do it under the shower for 5 minutes, or yeah, in the plane. I actually love playing around with this in the plane. Um,
mm.
but that, I think, doesn't make much sense to someone when you have an experience. Like, I do think there is something about first really doing it regularly, like with anything else. Like, if you do it regularly, you get a feeling for the practice, and then I think you will remember that you can do it while you're swimming, or while you're in the plane, or under the shower. I don't think that necessarily happens if you just do it once a month, right?
Mm,
um,
mm.
yeah, but that's like with every practice, right?
I
Like
was just
anything you
saying,
do regularly, you then become you start improvising and start taking it wherever you want to take it.
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Like, it's the same with meditation. It's the same with yoga. Like, and I'm sure any other practice, when you do something regularly, you build. Actually, Steve, who's Michaela's teaching partner who teaches the practitioner training for nonlinear, he talks about the golden thread of practice, like having a golden thread, which is, even if you're doing something every day, even if it's for 5 minutes, even if it's for an hour and a half, it's that continuation of practice that builds like a new neural pathway, which creates a muscle memory, creates it's when a practice then becomes a way of being, so you can bring it into everyday life, and it's not just something that you go off and do and then you come back to your kind of everyday life. You can start weaving it into your way of life, which for me, and I think for you with nonlinear, it's like a greater sensitivity to my body, to my yeses and nos, my my reactions to things, my pleasure, all of those, that consistent practice enable me to bring a lot more awareness into my day-to-day life of my body and my internal experience.
Yeah, because the practice, right, helps us to get sensitized when we are in the formal way of practicing, helps us to get sensitized to what is happening inside of us. And the more we get sensitized in the formal practice, the easier it gets to learn for that to happen with eyes open in situations with people, whether in romantic relationships, work relationships. We just feel much sooner, ooh, that something here, it either makes me clench or it makes me feel like open. And with that information, we then are more equipped to make decisions, any decisions, like in our life, right? What is a yes and what is a no? Yeah. And I think for that reason, because I know the formal practice or setting is like training ground to some degree too, I like to still attend guided sessions, right? Of course, I can just do this myself. But when I'm guided either through Michaela's online sessions or through you online sessions, there is something, it's almost like when I do it myself, there sometimes still is like a little, not a, let's call it like a persona, a little slight controller who needs to check, okay, now we're going to do this and now we're going to do that, right? Like we all have these different parts in us. When I am guided by a teacher, then I really can fully give myself to the practice. And there is something to be said for that, like to allow myself to be guided, because you and I, in our work, we often guide others. Yeah.
I love that, the little controller. Yeah, I have the little controller as well. And I think that's, I mean, when we learn how to hold to I was going to say teach, I don't really know if it's teaching, but facilitate these sessions for others, we learn quite quite detailed aspects of containment and holding a space for people where they can really allow their nervous system to relax and let go and just drop in for that 1 hour or however long that we're holding the session for. So that though, and though, just by little things, whether it's music, timing, our tone of voice, even the transitions between tracks, all of those things are really designed to allow people to just let go and let go of that little controller. And think that we were talking about practice, and I think regular practice is really important, but also I think if someone can come for once a month and they come for the full hour, that also creates a new neural pathway, because to allow yourself to just be guided and let go for an hour, we just, like, where else do we do that?
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
I mean, even now, like, I don't know. I mean, do people still go and no, I mean, people still go to yoga classes and stuff, but I see people bring their phones in, and to literally close your eyes and just move and be guided for an hour really does something. So even if you do it
Mm.
once to a session and do it once a month, I
Yeah.
think, huge impact.
Yeah, and I saw that, when I brought it into workshops, and most of the time it is new to people. It's
Mm.
just never done anything like it before, right? And often the feedback, so there's two lines of how people experience this the first time. And so if you're listening now, that might be really kind of good information, like just to have that in the back of your mind. So there's either the ones who are like, man, that felt so liberating. I can finally just move how I want to move. And I was not even aware that I actually need that, or that something in me
Mm.
needs that. So it can feel activating, it can feel releasing, or relaxing, re-energizing, and soothing, right? Um, but then, and I think that's because of the little controller we have in our head, right? Which I think many of us, we have like a part that we are familiar with that sits up here, right? Who wants to get it right? Yeah. And so if that part is quite strong in someone coming to nonlinear movement who kind of wants to get it right, it could be a bit, well, strange, because we are not, like, we give some guidance, but then you are left with your own experience. So no one is going to tell you to move the leg or to go on your back, or like, you're very free in your exploration. And if that controller is maybe quite strong still in your everyday experience of life, then that can make it a bit harder, because then that part is going to wonder, oh, am I doing this correctly? What exactly is this? How does that look?
Mm.
All these things which really don't matter, but well, this part has been trained a lot. Like let's put it that way. So that can make it feel a bit strange at first, or also if we are just not used to connect with our body and with our emotions, maybe, and thoughts, if we don't have any practice around that, right, then it can also feel challenging, because it could be that stuff comes up, and I wouldn't say too much stuff comes up, because it is a trauma-informed practice, right? We are not pushing any way in the experience in any way, but still, if you're not used to be with yourself and all of a sudden you are, things will arise, and that can feel uncomfortable. It can, and I mean, I've had that experience, right? It can feel uncomfortable, and so just just because it feels uncomfortable doesn't mean that you should stop, or that we should stop, because that's when we break through, you know clenching, emotional, maybe closure, trauma patterns that we carry. And if we just move a little bit through this discomfort, things can shift and change and help us liberate, right? Back to you. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah. um what do I have to say about that? Yeah, I mean, it's I liked how you explained that. I definitely get I think it's a bit like Marmite. Like I get some people actually not everyone will get that reference because that's a British like Marmite like Vegemite. It's like a
yes, yeah, Vegemite. I know Vegemite. I do not like it.
savory spread Marmite. So like Marmite, it's like you either love it or you hate it. That was like their whole brand
Yeah.
image for years. Yeah, and I get people that come to sessions and they're like, "Oh my God, that was amazing." Oh, I had a lot of emotion that came up, or yeah, they have some epiphanies, some connections about something that they've been, looping with, and then some people I won't see again, and they'll, I won't, I'll get a sense from their silence that they might have thought it was a bit weird, and that's okay. And it isn't for everybody, right?
No,
And I think
no.
it also depends on what you need in this point in your life. So, and then actually I'm doing a lot of like weight training and kind of quite physical exercise. And so I'm probably doing less kind of inner nonlinear exploration, than I used to, but it is a really good complement to that very external, like, pushing and structure and weights and um but you said something earlier about the subtle experience of life, and I think that's what's quite special about it, is that um it allows you to drop into a more subtle experience of life. And so much of our life, our everyday life, is what's the word, less subtle. It's to-do lists, it's reels on social media, it's rushing places, it's 3 coffees, it's stimulating food, it's a lot of like quite it's not harsh, but kind of things that are really hitting your senses a lot.
Stimulating a lot from
Stimulate. Yeah.
outer stimulation, right?
Yes, that's what I was
Yeah.
looking. Yeah. And so it is a real invitation to drop into a subtler experience. And that can be challenging in itself because it can feel like you're not doing anything. It can feel like you're being self-indulgent, or because there's no very clear kind of end goal, and so
It's nothing to achieve,
there's nothing to
right?
achieve.
Nothing to achieve, really, in nonlinear. And that's in many
Yeah.
ways, for many people, already quite unsexy in
Yeah.
our time, right?
Yeah.
Yet,
But yet it does bring so much. When I started doing online sessions, I think for a while I called them movement, mind, and epiphanies. And it didn't really go down that well because I think some people were like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? What's epiphanies? But because I did that 100-day practice, reflection practice, I did nonlinear movement for every day for 100 days. I had all these epiphanies. I had all these like realizations and ideas and dots connecting, and but yeah, it's there are outcomes, but they're not always clear or guaranteed or immediate.
and that's not why we do it, right? We're
Yeah.
not doing it to get
To get
insight
better.
and epiphanies, but they can be a byproduct of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when that happens, wonderful, but we also don't get attached to it, right? Because
Mm.
And there's certain, right? Like there's certain modalities in nonlinear movement, which with like the calling in practice or embodied manifestation, as I like to call it, that's where we do bring in visioning and like the mind to some extent a little bit more. And so it obviously is something like it activates the entire system differently than when we do a move what you feel or release or vitality practice. Yeah, but that now maybe goes a little bit too much into the details of it, especially if you're listening here for the first time. Yeah, well, I think we're gonna leave it here for today. I think we went in quite some, like there's different avenues we could go more into. And maybe we will.
Yeah. I feel like we could talk about it for hours, actually. We're like,
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we could. And maybe at some point, maybe what we can try also, like, let's see, maybe we're gonna ask people to send in maybe questions, and then we can speak to those as well and elaborate on those, because there is so much to be said about it, yet, yeah, we can also say too much, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it
then it gets overwhelming, right?
And it is actually overwhelmingly simple in the practice itself. So
Yes, yeah, exactly. Shall we leave it here? Is there anything else, Natalie, you want to share? You feel like you want to add to what we discussed today? What we conversed
No,
about?
I feel like I need to go and do some nonlinear movement now.
Yeah.
No, nothing else to say.
And depending where you're listening from, so Natalie is based in Hong Kong. So she has also monthly, sometimes twice a month session live online. And obviously they're tailored, they work well for Asia and I think also for the UK and Europe. I have them twice a month out of Dubai. So my sessions don't really work time-wise for Asia, but they work, for Dubai and kind of like UK, Europe, US. Between the two of us, you probably will find a time that will work for you if you want to try it out. Go on Natalie's, website, which is nataliegoni.com, right? Or Instagram. And the same with me, my website, Corinne Conrad. Corinne Conrad Calder.com.
We'll put the links
We put the links anyway. But yeah, we'd love to have you if this sparks any interest, and maybe we check in back here again. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Bye
Been a
everyone, and Nat, maybe you stay on for a moment.
pleasure.
Bye bye.